and welcome back to the Mighty Dragon after taking the summer off. I am back now recording, and I'm very proud to have Mr. Joe Fiorello on the line. Hello, sir.
Hi, Vicky. How are you?
Very good, thank you. How's life?
Oh, it's good. So yeah, I've just been settling into to New York life,
Yes.
since moving from Hong Kong. So it was a big adjustment and just trying to kind of get start getting settled in with house, home, family, that kind of stuff. But now it's kind of like feeling a little bit more like it's like now,
Yes.
at least kind of now able to start finding my way to what's gonna be the next steps and stuff here.
Oh, cool. I was going to actually say you were my 10th interview back in July 2018, and I've done about 100 interviews now, so
Oh,
just very
wow, yeah.
nearly there now. And at the time you were in Hong Kong, the filmmaker, you'd brought Love Stalk out and loads of other bits and pieces, music production as well. So what took you from Hong Kong back to the States?
Well, I mean, it was kind of the mundane thing of just work basically. Well, not even my work, it was so my wife's work basically brought her back. So they originally sent us out there kind of on a very temporary, indefinite basis. We thought we'd
Yeah.
be out there for like a year or two while she kind of just set up this new office. And then we were there for 9 years.
Oh,
And then so, it kind of was, bigger adventure than we had originally envisioned. So but then they asked
yeah.
her to come back to New York, and then so yeah, so that was basically it. We just had to kind of head back and
Yeah.
then try to figure out what would be like, how would we go from there.
Yeah, and so what was it like adjusting back into New York life? Did it change much since you'd left?
Uh, I mean, a little bit. You definitely had like a change in just in general, like the climate of like conversations and stuff, and just like music entertainment, especially like movies. I mean, we would end up getting in Hong Kong, but I felt like I was just like all of a sudden like nearly 10 years behind in just like what
Yeah,
like the music and pop culture was here.
okay.
And then yeah, just with like the political climate was just like, there's a lot of adjustments to kind of get to used to like figuring out like, oh, how people stand on that.
Yes.
But otherwise, it was a little tough because I mean, it felt like we were kind of like in the big city, and there was like a lot of kind of like, that like hustle and bustle lifestyle, and a lot of it was like me kind of going and running gun doing these little projects here and there, film projects and music projects and online projects, and then kind of getting thrown back into like basically like suburban life where I was like so far removed from that, because I mean, you have that in New York City, but like I felt that even the places where it used to be when we left New York, it's no longer there. It's moved to other places. So now everything's
Okay.
in like Brooklyn, and not even the places in Brooklyn I knew about. It's like deeper in, where it's like
Yeah.
different neighborhoods. That like back when I left, it was just like, oh, you don't go into that neighborhood. It's dangerous. Now it's like, oh, that's the new art center where like, they
Oh
just
my
have all the
God.
shows and stuff.
It's so crazy. I feel the same about London,
Yeah.
and I'm just waiting for where I've got a flat that gets cool and I can make a lot of money on that flat, but it's not quite yet. But there's so many
Yeah.
areas in cities that change so much, isn't there? I would say a lot of us Gwelos miss Hong Kong. Do you miss Hong Kong and your
I
life there?
do, I definitely miss it. There's a lot of things just things I took for granted that like,
Yeah.
things you could just walk into like a welcome or a park and shop and it just find so easily. I remember one time like around like I think like around Chinese New Year, it was just like my wife's like, "Oh, let's get like some of that like, that special wine so we can make like, this particular dish and stuff." And then trying to find like that like anywhere here, it was just like, oh, you really have to go deep into like Chinatown, New
Yeah.
York to find that kind of stuff. The
Yeah.
real like, authentic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Occasionally I started finding supermarkets that would have like a lot of stuff from back in Hong Kong, from Japan, from like everywhere. But then like things like it just like certain things that like, oh, it would just be like a whole shelf of in like, welcome. It's just like, oh yeah, here's this one option. Meanwhile, it's like
Super.
the opposite for like American stuff. It's like you go in and it's just like, oh, here, where like you go there and it's like, oh, here's like the three choices of American cereal you have, and then like there it's just like a whole aisle of just like, you know 20 different types of like, Captain Crunch, it's just like it's kind of,
Crazy.
the first time I went into the supermarket again, it was just like it was kind of like overwhelming. It's like with choices, like I don't know what to choose.
Oh, it's mad, isn't it? I always think a lack of choice is always better because you know where you stand. It's then
Yeah.
overwhelming, isn't it? It's like we spoke about China being the center of the film industry. Do you still see that?
I mean, I think a lot has changed from then, especially with regards to, I guess, I'm at this point, I wouldn't consider myself like an expert or insider because I'm not really there, but just
Yeah,
from everything I've been seeing in like the changes in the way it seems like movies are being financed and what movies are financed and what movies are kind of held back and like don't do well. It seems like back then there was like this focus on like, all right, well, there's a lot of like money that's being thrown out from Chinese companies because they want to get into like Hollywood. They want to get into like Hollywood movies, and they were just kind of
yeah,
like, there's a lot of financing to kind of go and grab. And at the time, and I think like the business model that like Hollywood tried to kind of put together was like, oh well, if we just basically make exactly what the type of movie we were going to make, but oh, we just throw in a Chinese character, or we just
right.
throw in this like little subplot that happens to be in Shanghai or something like that. It's like I think that was like the going thing, and I think people kind of got smart to that, and so like, oh no, we can't do that anymore. And so I think that business model is like out the door. I don't think you can get away with that anymore because there was a backlash, especially like
Mm,
you had things like Iron Man 3 where they're like, oh well, here's like a bunch of like, like all the Chinese stuff that was thrown in for all. Yeah, I don't know how much of the budget came from China, but I think it was like 50% or something like that. But then, oh, here's a bunch of like random scenes that like you could easily cut them out and it changes nothing in the story. I don't think you can get away with that anymore. And then there are a
yeah,
lot of these movies where it's just like, like, oh, let's throw in the Chinese character among them and stuff. I think they got smart to that. But at the same time, then I think they tried to transfer to like, oh, well, let's make a Chinese movie, but throw in the American character in there, just like this one guy, and then that failed too because you had like Matt Damon and the Great Wall and stuff. So I
oh
think,
yeah,
and then there was like a big backlash where I think like a lot of companies were investing in like Hollywood studios, and the Chinese government said like, oh no, we're not going to allow that anymore. So I think you
right,
that whole idea of like Hollywood going over there again, like easy money to finance a film that they were going to make anyway, I don't think that's gonna work. But I think also they realized that like the let's just throw one famous Guilo in a otherwise Chinese movie, that's not gonna work too. What I see is that what you got it what the big companies are gonna need to stay in China to kind of like as far as their diversification and their needed to be in that market. But I think they really need to kind of think as to like what would be like a really kind of like culturally appropriate movie for China, as opposed to like, oh, let's just feed them
yeah,
American movie. Because you never know when, like, even with that, like you never know when the government's just like, oh, we're not gonna allow that kind of movie anymore. Like remember like when time travel became an issue where like all of a sudden they stopped time travel movies. And I knew people that were like in development of a time travel movie. They're like, oh, we got this movie, it's got time travel in it, it's gonna we're a go, we got the green light, we got the financing, we're ready to shoot. And then that came, and then suddenly like, oh, the movie just disappeared. It's like I think you really need to kind of have someone on the ground in that's gonna like, okay, well, here's this Chinese story that you can maybe bring a little bit of a Hollywood twist to, but not like, you can't just make like something that's like what would otherwise be a Hollywood movie and then pretend like, oh, this is a Chinese movie now. I think it's
yeah,
like you have to now kind of like differentiate the two markets now because there's not going to be as much crossover, especially because you never know when even just like one actor's words could completely destroy a whole movie, where it's just like, oh, they make one random Twitter post and next we're banning the movie. I
yeah,
mean, I think Hollywood studios are not going to be able to count on that, but they have to be in there. So I think whether you're big or small, you kind of need to like really kind of like do your research and think about like, okay, what kind of story could we make in China for China,
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're gonna have to do, and I think that's what they're gonna be doing,
Right.
because yeah, they have to kind of get in there, and I think vice versa. Where China originally they're like, oh, we want to be the next Hollywood. I think what they are now kind of realizing, like, well, we should be kind of Hollywood-ish, not like necessarily try to like make movies for the world, but make Hollywood-ish movies that are basically Chinese movies. And I think
Right.
you saw them do like a lot, get a lot of good success with like let's say the Wonder on Earth, big like
Yeah.
Hollywood style spectacle blockbuster disaster film, but it's basically a Chinese movie. And it was enjoyable from like even watch on Netflix. It's like, oh, okay, I could get that. It didn't seem like it was forced, like to try to fit like the square peg into a round hole. So I think there's good opportunities. I think if people really kind of go in there, dive into the culture and really try to make like a movie that like will really sell to there.
Yeah, that's a great response. Thank you. I really wanted to pick that out from when we spoke about it before to now, because things change so much, especially there. I
Yeah, true.
found, and also all the messaging you hear about what's coming out of China. I read the other day that they're trying to stamp out celebrity culture, but I don't know if that was just a load of rubbish I read on the internet or what. But you want,
Yeah, it's
you
hard to
know,
say, because I mean, there's certain things that like, they'll just, the I guess I remember when I first moved when I first visited Beijing, I met this one lady that had been there from like 1982 and trying to like do business there and stuff. And she said that like the big thing that she finds is that the mentality of like the people in charge is they have this like very much two steps forward, one step back culture,
yeah,
of like the way they do things. They let people kind of try to like go ahead and try different things, but they want to take that control. So it's like you go, people get too far away from something, and they're like, oh no, we now have to like rein it in. And so that's what you
yeah,
see. It's like at one point they said like, oh, we're not going to allow hip hop in like randomly, because I guess like all these celebrities were just dressing very like hip hop style. And then like and then all of a sudden it's just like, yeah, completely gone from the airwaves. It's like all the you couldn't wear this, you couldn't wear baggy this, you couldn't wear baseball caps and stuff. And then recently somebody sent me over a video. They're like, oh, they had this like hip hop show with Jackson Wang, who was like he was a Chinese singer that was with a K-pop group, but then he went back and now he's doing like a solo act, and now he's got his own little now he's got this little think tank of music, music think tank that he's putting together, Team Wang, that I guess now he's trying to develop new artists, and he has
mm,
this like hip hop group. And then so I'm like, I saw that, I'm like, wait a minute, didn't they ban hip hop? So oh, I guess it's back again. So I guess it's one of those things where it's like,
yes,
yeah, they'll allow it, and but then they're like, oh, we don't want to get away too much, because I guess they don't want like Western culture to completely dominate.
got it.
So they're like, oh no, we got to bring it back. And then
So,
so
I guess with this, sorry to interrupt, where does
no, no,
this
go ahead.
leave Hong Kong filmmakers? Where does it leave them now?
I think it, I think it leaves a lot of like, it might leave them in a tough spot, because I guess from, there's a lot of people who want to do like, you know, studio films and stuff like that, and they really have to work in the studio system. But, you know, unless you're really in with one of those big Hong Kong studios and stuff, I mean, I mean, when I was there, I know there was a lot of people that wanted to kind of cross over and try to get into like the Chinese market, but I think you had to get up to like a real like level of financing and budget and connections and stuff. And I think, it was always hard to kind of like make that, like even with like Love Stock, we tried to get that into China, and we found
Yeah,
like, oh, well, we need a lot of money to get like a small film out there, because of just promotion and kind of getting the right people on board and tie-ins and stuff. So I think if you already made it to that level, I think there those bigger filmmakers, like like Barbara Wong, like she still has this kind of independent spirit while she's like doing kind of her own stories, but she knows she's already become big enough where she can kind of get in there because she has the tie-ins with the studios and stuff. And then so I think like when you're at that level, it's probably not going to be an issue. But I think for smaller, mid-size filmmakers trying to get into China, it's always going to be a challenge, because you really need to find that way in. And it's tough, because I never felt like there was like, kind of like, you always hear about like, oh, there's clever ways to kind of like
Yeah.
disrupt the industry and kind of like, find your ways in. And it's just with like so many barriers, it makes it harder to kind of find some disruption mechanism to get in there, being a little guy. So um but I think for Hong Kong filmmakers that want to try to like, kind of up do stuff, I know like people still want to do stuff in Hong Kong, using kind of like those facilities and the expertise and know-how, but to make films for the West. I think there's still opportunities there. It's just,
Yeah.
the problem is like, Hong Kong is so closed off because of the pandemic now. I think people are still waiting for things to open up.
Yeah.
I think so. Hopefully once things open, get the ball rolling, because I know of a lot of projects that are like, oh, we were getting ready to go, but now the pandemic, and we can't deal with these like, 2 week 2 week quarantines and stuff, and back and forth, and so it's a little tougher. I think people are still kind of trying to wait it out and find when's the pandemic going to finally end, so they can kind of start kickstarting these smaller projects.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask actually, from your 9 years in Hong Kong, would you say that in your projects now that you've kind of retained some of the Hong Kong style ways of working, or, your approach to things? Did it change you?
I mean, there's definitely things that I kind of keep in mind, that I learned along the way, that was just like, very invaluable to like learn there, firsthand, just working on projects. But, I think um, what really kind of connected with me is that like, for an independent filmmaker, Hong Kong really, for somebody who's looking to do kind of like indie guerrilla style filmmaking, Hong Kong really kind of connected to that, because it felt like, where like, let's say someplace in New York or LA or something like that, they really try to dissuade that kind of stuff, and they really try to clamp down on that. You if you get caught a video camera trying to shoot something that looks like a film in the middle of New York City, a cop's going to come and find you and ask you, where's your permit, and
Right.
we had production shut down just like that. And I found like, when we went to Hong Kong, it was completely different. It was just because I guess they don't have as many tightened rules regarding those things, because a lot of it, even the bigger productions, were like a lot more free flowing, and kind of like, with skirting a lot of the typical like rules that like would be like in Hollywood style productions. It's like, a lot of those rules either don't exist, or they're kind of bendable or whatever, so just whatever you could do to make sure that the film gets done. And then so that appealed to me and really kind of connected. And I think that's why really, when I dove in there, it was like, oh, I've really found a home to actually create the same way that I wanted to back in New York,
Right.
and I found other people that really were kind of like the same mind. So from that standpoint, like, trying to do a Hong Kong style production here, I feel like I learned a lot of stuff, but I would run into those same barriers. Like, I wouldn't be able to like say, oh, let's grab a couple of friends and have like, a kung fu fight in the park. Somebody's going to come over and be like, okay, where's your permit? Where
Right.
like in Hong Kong, it was just like, there's a lot more leeway. It's like, oh wait, do you have permission to work here? Oh yeah, well, we're just gonna shoot a quick little thing and then we'll go. Okay, make sure it's quick, and then you go. And then it's like that,
That's so Hong Kong, isn't it?
you
Oh,
know,
right. Okay. Yeah.
you know. I think there was like, I think I don't know if I told you like the last time, but I think there's only two times I kind of like got genuinely scared I was getting get in trouble for something we were shooting, and it was for weird things. It was like, one of them was like, we were in Mongkok shooting a scene where it was a scene for a music video where basically I was playing the actor, and I was supposed to be stalking after this like, this like um um this woman that's walking through the streets, this mysterious woman. I'm the mysterious guy, and I'm supposed to be stalking after her. It was, the actress was Louisa Ward, who's back in Hong Kong now, and she's beautiful, amazing, talented actress. And so she's doing this thing where she's walking around and like, being mysterious. I'm chasing after her and stuff. And there's this part where I'm running down the street, and suddenly these like PTU cops that were like all, walking down the street, they start running over and start like yelling at me in Cantonese. I'm like, oh my God, am I in trouble? And then what happened is like they're like talking to like the people with the camera, they're talking to this, that. I'm going to my friend who's like holding a camera, like, what's going on? Like, are they trying to stop the shoot? They're like, no, they want to arrest you. I'm like, why? Why do you want to arrest me? They're like, they think you're drunk and that you're running through the streets because you're drunk. And I'm like, well, did you tell them I'm not drunk? We're shooting a video. And they're like, yeah, I told them. They don't believe me. They think that you're drunk and that's why you're running in the middle of the street, because why else would you be running in the street? And then we'll explain to them, I'm just, we're trying to shoot the scene. I'm chasing after this woman. And then like, look, there's the actress there. She's not in any danger. She's waiting for us to continue the scene. And then so they go to my friend who was working the camera. They're like, are you sure he's not drunk? They're like, yeah, we're sure he's not drunk. He's just an actor. He's shooting the video. It's like, okay, can we stay and watch for a scene? Okay, sure. All right, action. Do the scene again. Cut. All right, back to the beginning. They stood there for like about 2 takes, and they're like, all right, we're bored of this, and then they walked away. That was it. There was
Brilliant.
that. you know.
Oh man, that's mad, isn't it? Completely nuts. Only in Hong Kong, though. Only in
Yeah.
Hong Kong do
Only
those
Hong
random
Kong.
things. Talking of Hong Kong, I have to mention Crazy from Kong. I'm a huge fan. I love it. Crazy from Kong Radio, right?
Oh
I was
yeah, the
blasting it
CFK
out. You had your
radio that we
first.
just launched.
Oh, it was really, really good. So, is this going to be more like you're going to go down that route a bit more now, or?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like it's something that we wanted to kind of change up the formula. I mean, a lot of it's like Arna's basically been like kind of
Yeah,
in charge of it there. So I've just been kind of helping however I can, kind of
yeah,
offsite. But yeah, I mean the thing is like we were doing the food reviews, and I know Spencer really wanted to keep on doing the food reviews, but the problem is it was hard to kind of break through
mm,
the crowded like YouTube field now, and especially
yeah,
like there's so many other like food review channels in the US, UK, Australia, Japan,
hmm,
that like let's say that just would get in the algorithm higher than we would. And then so Arna and the guys really wanted to try to find something that like, okay, well, what's something that really somebody in the UK or somebody in like LA can't do in Hong Kong necessarily. And a lot of it was just like really relying on the visuals, the art,
yeah,
this the pop culture, the street art. So that's what kind of led him to like, oh, let's start doing these like walk and talks through Hong Kong. Let's start doing these um you know um interview like local artists that are doing some really cool things that you can't find anywhere else in the world. And then that kind of like led to where it was just like, oh, let's start exploring the music. And a big thing is, so I started getting into more music and DJing
yeah.
and stuff here, and I ended up getting invited for a guest mix for like a Brooklyn radio station. So which I then
Oh,
introduced
fantastic.
Arna.
Yeah,
And oh, thanks. Yeah. So I was pretty
great.
excited. And then I introduced Arna, and then they asked him to do like a live set, like, he does like live hardware sets. And he's like, yeah, sure, I could do stuff. So he did something like, it was like Acid House slash Jungle Mix. And they put it on there. And then so after talk of that, he's just like, we could really do this for CFK. We could just,
Yeah,
do this and have the visuals of like, Hong Kong and style, like the style and the culture and just like all these different like, cool like images. And then he was also influenced by like he had done this interview with like a vaporwave company, so it kind of all came together with that, like all these pieces together, and it's just like, yeah, we could have like local musicians, these cool visuals, and kind of do this thing. He was really inspired by this like back in the day, I guess it was Future Sounds of London had done something similar with their like some radio station on
mm,
BBC. So yeah, so we just decided like he put out the call, and then just started getting tons of like submissions from like local artists, and like also artists abroad, like sending in their music and stuff. I threw in
yeah,
one track too, Arna threw in a
yeah,
track, and then yeah, he spent like a week just shooting like these like places all around like Hong Kong, and like adding the visuals, with the guys and stuff. And then so we were really happy to like where it came. I hope it kind of blows up. I think it's like anything, it takes a little time for it to kind of like get out there, but we'll see. Hopefully this will be like a cool new direction to take CFK
very
out
good.
there.
I really enjoy it. I love the walkthroughs. It's such a trip down memory lane for me. Actually, I've got two last questions for you. Fiorello Films, are you a filmmaker still, or are you a music producer, or are you still both?
So at this point, I'm leaning more heavily into the music production.
Yeah.
I still have like ideas I want to kind of like, take visually, but I think now it's like that's kind of taken my passion. But
Yeah.
it's always been kind of like where it's like, it ebbs and flows for me. I mean, I started off in music like back in the day. It wasn't like like all through like my high school years and college. It was kind of something I was kind of interested in trying to make music and stuff. And then I kind of stopped and around college is when I started thinking like, oh, well, I want to kind of like start doing like, writing, screenwriting, kind of.
Yeah.
I was connecting with a lot of filmmakers there, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that. I want to get into
Mm.
that. I had some ideas I was starting to put down the paper and stuff. So, and then it was like after I graduated, I'm like, oh, let me start shooting this like kind of like on the side and stuff, and as these like little short films and short videos, and and then it was like when I started getting to a point where like, oh, I need background music. So, oh, let me start making music again. It's like so it's
Yeah.
always been kind of like I've been kind of trading back and forth. I do wish that like I had kind of jumped back into music, earlier because I think I focused a lot on just the film side.
Yeah.
Well, I think like, like Arnold, like with who had been kind of for a while saying like, yeah, Joe, we need to get you to start like making music again because he'd heard some of my stuff that I kind of like was playing around with before I'd come to Hong Kong. And it took a while before I finally jumped in. And after that, I'm like, oh man, I'm kind of like home again.
Yeah.
So,
Brilliant.
so it is something where it's like, that's kind of where my passion is and my inspirations take me now. But, it is something where it's like, occasionally inspiration takes me back to the page and
Yeah.
and then once it gets me to the page, it's like, oh, now I gotta shoot this thing. I can't just keep it on the page.
Yeah.
So I'm sure like at some point Fiorello Films will actually start gravitating towards trying to develop another film,
Yeah.
but I guess I'm just waiting for like, the inspiration and to really kind of take me in and also to find like, I guess because it's tough, like I don't have like that creative group anymore here yet. So I'm still kind of trying to build that out.
Yeah.
But it's been great, like let's say just over the internet, like
Hmm.
working on a screenplay for Arna, like like
Yeah.
every now and then. So yeah, so we'll see how what the future brings. But
Uh, my last question I have to ask you, I've heard separately from Anna and also from Mike Leader that you have some legendary stories from Hong Kong. What is your favorite story of an experience, a Hong Kong
oh,
experience?
my the thing that always kind of pops up is like one of those like, oh my god, I can't believe this happened. There was this time, I used to go a good amount to like the Asian Film Awards because through like Live Not Dead, there would be somebody who would have like extra tickets to kind of sit in the audience and check it out and stuff. And
Yeah.
occasionally be able to kind of like make it to like one of the little after parties and stuff. And I remember there was one time I went there and I was meeting up with Harry Du Young. And so me and Harry were like walking there and stuff, and we were kind of heading towards the area where you would basically go and sit in the audience, like kind of everybody else and stuff. But then I don't know, something came over me, and I'm like, Harry, this year we are walking the red carpet. And he's like, well, Joe, we don't have an invitation to like, walk on the red carpet. How are we going to do that? I'm like, we're going to do it. We just have to like have confidence. We're going to go and we're going to make it happen. So what happened is, we approach the sign where it's like right for like the audience and right and left to the red carpet. Like we start heading towards the red carpet and we're walking along. As we're walking along, we bump into like a friend of mine that had been doing acting classes and writing classes with Nicole Froelich. And then she had like a friend that she was with. And then they're like, oh, we're kind of lost. We're trying to find a place where we can go to like the audience and stuff. I'm like, well, we're going to head to the red carpet. She's like, oh my God, you got an invitation? I'm like, no, but we're going to make it happen. And you know what? You guys should come to the red carpet with us. I think like, the four
Yeah.
of us together, there's
Yeah.
no stopping us. So like, all right, cool. So the four of us start making away. We're making way over to like, this area where we find a security guard who's like blocking the area. He's like, yeah, can we see your tickets? He's like, yeah, we have our tickets right here. And he's like, there's a tickets to sit in the audience. I'm like, what? What do you mean? We were supposed to have tickets to walk the red carpet. They're expecting us out there right now. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's just like, he's like, we're like, yeah, we're supposed to be on the red carpet. They're waiting for us. In fact, we were supposed to get dropped out off by a limo, but then the limo dropped us off at the wrong place. That's why we're coming through this entrance instead of the other entrance. And he's like giving me this like, "Are you kidding me?" Look, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm completely serious." He's like, "All right, let me talk to somebody." He goes over and he's just like, he talks to like, he goes over and he comes back with, I guess, the person who's supposed to be announcing who goes over to the, the red carpet. It's like the host. It turns out it's a friend of mine who's like, usually is like a professional, like, host,
Yeah.
event host. And then so she's just like, "Joe, what are you doing here?" I'm like, "We're here to walk the red carpet." And she's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know what happened to our tickets to walk the red carpet." She's like, "All right, come follow me." So she comes in and then she basically announces us. She's like, "Now coming out to the red carpet, Joe Fiorello, Harry DeYoung, Nicole Froelich," and I forgot the other woman's name, the Nicole's friend.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then so we walk out, and then like sure enough, we have like the concierge staff like kind of tell us where to like stand, and it's like, "All right, stand here," and then face it, and we're facing the whole paparazzi, and they're like, "Oh, there must be somebody because they got announced and everything." Clicking pictures,
Yeah.
stuff like that. And then like, yeah, trying to like act all cool, looking around and stuff like that. And we kind of walk off and we walk off. And as we're going in, I realized we get inside. They had been broadcasting all that inside where everybody's sitting. So like all the people that just went with their regular kind of like sitting in the audience tickets. We walk in like, we own the place. And like all of them like, "You bastards, how did you get out there? How did you get in the red carpet? How did you finagle your way there?" He's like, "Oh, we just had the confidence." And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
so we watched the Asian Film Awards, and I remember like Michelle Yeoh was there, and she gave like this speech and stuff like that. She made this joke there, and I'm like, "Oh man, would it be so great to kind of like hang around with Michelle?"
Oh my gosh.
So what happened is afterwards, like they're like, "All right, well, you need a special ticket to get to the after party." But I'm like, "Well, that hasn't stopped us yet." So we take on the bus to go to the after party, and we're like, "All right, we're just gonna sneak our way in." And then so there was like all this press going on, and they're all surrounding Michelle and stuff like that. And Harry's trying to figure out like one way how to get out there. He's going towards the ticket booth to see if he can kind of sneak in there. But I'm like, "No, no, let's pretend we're press." And then so what happened is I go over my camera, taking pictures, and when nobody's looking, I'm just like, "Hey, Harry, yeah, Michelle's entourage here. We're joining with them." I just yell out. So we just kind of connect with like a bunch of people that are like waiting for Michelle to come out. And Michelle Yeoh is just like kind of joins this crew, and we're kind of like following behind. It's all tight knit, and we're all kind of walking by, and we're all packed in like clams, waiting for the elevator. And this one guy just like, he just looks at me. He's like, "Are you meant to be here, mate?" And I'm like, not really. You?" He's like, "No, not me either. I'm kind of sneaking in. All right, let's keep each other secrets." And then so we all kind of like pack into the elevators, and Harry goes in one elevator, I go in one elevator. And then so what happened is we all shuffle in the elevators, and then I turn around to get my bearings to see like, oh, who's in the elevator with me. And Harry's not in there with me, but I'm like standing right across from Michelle in this packed elevator, and everyone's gushing on like, "Oh yeah, Michelle, it was such a great speech, and I love that joke," and stuff like that. And I'm just like, all right, in my head, I'm like, "Don't say something stupid. Don't say something stupid. Just pretend, just act like you belong." And I'm just like, so I didn't want to say anything. I'm like, "Yeah, that was a," I think I mentioned like, "Yeah, that was a great joke." And then so she kind of looks at me because she was like talking to everybody, like, like she knows really well. And then she looks at me, she's like, kind of gives me this look like, who the hell are you?" And I'm like, all right, I can either just like, panic, or I could just play it straight. So I'm just like, I gave her this kind of like nod, like, and then she gives me the nod too. And then that was it. We left the elevator. I'm in the after party, and then she kind of went off her own way. And then Harry came up the next elevator, and then yeah, we didn't hang around with Michelle past that, but like
Yeah,
I
that's
had that
so
that one
funny.
moment in an elevator, Michelle, where we just kind of like pleasantly nodded at each other. It was like,
That is so funny. I tell you what, though, that just proves that you can do anything if you have the confidence just to see your way through there.
yeah,
Just,
true.
oh, fantastic. Anyway, thank you, Joe, for sharing all of that with us today, and also for bearing with me. I'm very rusty at interviewing at the moment. I've not done it for a few months now, so
No,
I'm
no
feeling a
problem,
bit
Vicky.
rusty. Anyway, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Joe.
thanks so
And
much for having me.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll catch up with you in another couple of years for the Mighty Dragon and see where you're at then.
Sounds good.
Yeah, take care of yourself.
All right, take care. Have a good
Bye.
one. See ya.
Bye. Big thanks to Joe Fiorello, and I'll see you soon on the Mighty Dragon.